Part 1. What they used instead of paper. The trail kit nobody advertised out on the open range. Paper was for contracts, letters, and the cook's grocery list. You didn't waste it. When nature called, cowboys reached for what the country offered. Grass if you were lucky, sand if you weren't, and unsettled homesteads dried corncobs waiting in a bucket by the privy. None of it was glamorous. All of it was normal. That's the first thing people forget about the West. Survival turns odd choices into everyday habits. On the trail there was a quiet etiquette. Slip downwind of camp, give the herd some distance. Step well away from water, and handle your business fast. If you were near the wagon, you asked the cook where not to go. If you were miles from anyone, you picked a slight rise with wind and privacy. Most hands carried nothing special, just common sense. You learned to read the ground like a map. Soft soil meant easy burial, tall grass meant cover. Sand meant a dry solution that worked in a pinch. Grass was the favorite when it was green and generous. Wide blades beat thin ones. You grabbed a handful, checked for thorns or stickers, twisted it into a small bundle, and did the job without drama. In the high country, men knew which grasses cut like paper and which felt soft as a Sunday napkin. You learned fast, or you learned loud. Nobody wanted to be the punchline at the fire that night. When grass was short or winter had shaved the prairie close, sand stepped in. Dry, clean sand behaves like an eraser. You scooped with your palm, used a few passes, and finished with a tidy scrape of the heel to cover your tracks. In the desert you respected distance. From camp even more dust carries news. Some cowboys swore a handful of cool creek pebbles worked better than sand. Maybe. Most preferred not to experiment twice. Homesteads and lying camps had an upgrade. A proper privy with a door that banged in the wind and a crate of supplies. Before mail order catalogs and newspaper stacks took over, those supplies were often corncobs dried, dekerned, and kept in a bucket like spare parts for dignity. They didn't tear. They didn't run out after a storm, and they lasted all winter. We'll get to the fine art of the corncob later. For now, remember this: the West loved tools that didn't complain. Water was the luxury option. If you were far from camp and had a canteen to spare, a quick rinse was the cleanest solution of all. But water was life on the trail, and nobody poured it out lightly. The cook would sooner share his last coffee than watch you waste a canteen on comfort when a day's ride waited under a hot sky. Besides, creek water wasn't always a blessing. Upstream might be cattle, and cattle do not write apology notes. Hygiene was practical, not precious. Hands got washed with a splash of coffee, or a pinch of sand and a wipe on the chaps. Soap came out at sundown when there was enough water to make it count, and even then it felt like a holiday. The rule was simple: keep sickness out of camp and stink downwind. A clean bandana did more for a cowboy's social life than any bottle. In a saddlebag, people imagine the West as a parade of gunfights. Truth is, most days were a march of chores. This subject fits right in with that reality. Small, unglamorous choices, repeated 1,000 times, that kept a crew moving. You rode fence, checked water, watched the sky, and when you stepped off the trail for a minute of privacy, you used what the land offered. No complaints, no speeches, just a job done. Another mile, and a joke later if the company was right. There was humor in it, sure. A wag might hold up a stiff bunch of buffalo grass and say, "Luxury model." Another would answer, "Wait till payday, then I upgrade to corn." Laughter was the West's great disinfectant. It kept embarrassment small and the day rolling. And when a greenhorn asked, wide-eyed, "What do I use?" the foreman would point at the whole horizon and say, "Partner, pick your favorite." That's the spirit of this story. The West didn't have much, but it always had something. Grass, sand, cob, water if you were blessed. A catalog page if you were civilized enough to live near a store. The method changed with the land. The rule never did. Leave no mess, leave no trace. And don't let the cook catch you fouling his wind. Out there, manners mattered more than paper ever did. Part to grass, the prairie's green answer. If the range had a standard issue, it was grass. It grew everywhere except where you needed it most. And even then you could usually find a tuft standing brave against the wind. Cowboys learned the catalog of prairie grasses the way sailors learn Stars, big bluestem, gentle, switchgrass, reliable. Needle and thread, beautiful to look at, unwise to trust those ons bite back. You didn't need botany, you needed memory and a little caution. Technique was half the comfort. You went for a handful, not a blade. Twist it once to make a soft bundle. If the grass was dry and crisp, you doubled the handful or dipped lower where it kept a little spring. Morning dew made even stiff grass kinder. After a rain, almost everything worked. After a drought, you learned to cheat with weeds that looked like grass and prayed they behaved like it for the next 30 seconds of your life. The season decided your mood. In spring and early summer, grass felt like mercy. In late summer, the sun sharpened every edge. Men carried small routines to soften the blow. A damp band and a wipe for hands. A quick step to the wind's good side. A neat boot scrape to finish. Nobody wrote this down. You copied the older hands and skipped the mistakes you saw them hide behind a joke. Caution kept you from hard lessons. Avoid anything that glistened with sap, anything with barbs, anything a cow wouldn't chew twice. Steer clear of poison ivy and anything shaped like it. Stay away from cactus country or slow down until your eyes beat your feet. The frontier taught patience in odd places. This was one of them. Rushing turned a private chore into a public story. In timber country, leaves joined the team, but grass still took the lead. Broad cottonwood leaves, soft willow, even mullein when you found it, those were gifts, not guarantees. On the open plains, grass did the job day after day, mile after mile. It didn't run out when a cook spill ruined the paper bag, or a rainstorm turned your pockets into soup. You could count on grass the way you count on sunrise. Etiquette mattered as much as method. A cowboy gave water a wide berth. 200 steps was the old rule, and buried or scattered. When he was done, he watched the wind, picked a hollow, and respected the herd. Horses spoke at surprises. Cattle remember bad experiences longer than men. The crew's comfort rode on quiet, invisible habits, and this was one of the quietest. Was it perfect? No. Was it normal? Completely. Men adapted. A rider might carry a small rag in his saddlebag for emergencies, but most relied on what grew under their boots. The proud ones claimed they could judge an acre's comfort by sight. The honest ones admitted they mostly got by, laughed at themselves, and kept moving. Every now and then, a green partner tried to tough it out with the wrong plant and learned a quick, persuasive lesson. The cook would clap him on the shoulder that night and pass the coffee. Congratulations, you've met the prairie. The whole fire would grin because everyone had earned that diploma. Out here, education came in small classes with no professor, just a landscape and your willingness to learn. In the end, grass wasn't just a solution, it was a symbol. The West asked you to use what was at hand, to be practical, to keep a sense of humor where dignity might otherwise quit. Grass held up its end of the bargain, humble, renewable, and everywhere. The job took a minute, the story took a lifetime, and the trail rolled on like nothing happened. That was the point. Part 3: Sand, ash, and water, dry clean on a dusty trail when the prairie shaved itself bald or the desert turned the world into thorns. Cowboys reached for sand. Clean, dry sand acts like a scrub. You scooped a handful, worked quickly, and finished neat. It wasn't soft, but it was effective. And on a trail where dust lived in your teeth anyway, it felt like meeting the day on its own terms. Men joked it was frontier talc. Nobody argued, especially not in August. Ash from the cook fire played a similar role in camp. A pinch on the hands took grease off better than cold water, and a little went a long way to keep things tidy. In a world that leaned toward the opposite, some camps kept a small bucket near the privy so folks could dust and cover fast. The rule stayed the same: out of the wind, away from water, and never where stock might nose around. Respect kept everyone healthy. Water was a careful luxury. In town, a bath and a proper wash felt like a holiday. On the trail, you protected your canteen like a bank account. If the drive ran along a river and the boss allowed it, a quick rinse finished the job cleanest of all. But cowboys knew the danger of careless washing downstream drinkers, upstream herds, and the sickness that follows a lazy decision. The West punished shortcuts. That's why good outfits had quiet systems and kept them. Your crew's health was your paycheck, Some riders carried a rag for emergencies, washed and sun-dried when privacy allowed. Others swore by Smooth Creek stones cool, rounded, easy to clean and leave behind. In really dry country, even dust itself worked. A few careful passes, a tidy heel scrape, and done. It sounds strange at a distance. It makes perfect sense when you live where rain is a rumor and comfort is whatever doesn't slow you down. Clothing helped more than people think. Long underwear and pants kept dust off skin, and a regular shakeout at night saved a world of trouble. The old hands taught the young ones to air their bedrolls, wash hands before supper, and keep the privy downwind. These were not fussy rules, they were trail medicine. You don't need a doctor when you keep the doctor's problems away. Town offered upgrades, clean outhouses behind cafes, a stack of newspapers by the door, even a roll of store-bought paper if the owner was proud of his modern tastes. The crew would come back smelling like soap and swagger, only to hit the trail next morning and go right back to sand and good habits. That rhythm, civilized, then practical, was the heartbeat of a drive. Critters made caution part of the process. Ant beds, scorpions, snakes, another reason to pick your spot with eyes first, boots second. Cowboys learned to tap the ground with a stick, step lightly, and keep business quick. It wasn't fear, it was respect for a place that had more residents than the map admitted. Was any of this glamorous? No. Was it resourceful? Absolutely. Sand, ash, water when you could spare it, simple materials, used with thought. That kept a crew healthy and moving. The West rewarded people who didn't fight it. You worked with what the land gave, returned the favor by leaving little behind, and rode on with a clear conscience and a clean pair of hands. When folks today imagine the frontier, they see wide hats and longer shadows. Add this picture to the frame: a rider stepping off the trail, handling a private minute with calm efficiency, and returning to the herd before his horse stops flicking flies. That composure, the small discipline nobody sings about, built the West as surely as any hammer or rope. Part 4. The corncob, the catalog, and the march toward modernness. An old homesteader what sat in the outhouse bucket before newspapers and catalogs, and you'll hear the same answer from Kansas to the Panhandle. Corn cobs, dried, dekerned, and stacked like kindling. They were the frontier's most dependable supply. Tough enough to last, smooth enough when properly cleaned, and always in season after harvest. Farms that grew corn never ran out, which made cobs the perfect match for winters long on cold and short on comfort. There was a craft to it. The best cobs were dry and clean, with the roughness knocked off by hand or time. Some folks even rubbed them with a scrap of cloth to tame the texture. Buckets lived in the corner of the privy with a lid to keep out mice. A second bucket held lime or ash to sprinkle after use, which kept smell down and flies uninterested. Practical, simple, effective. The West's favorite adjectives. Newspapers arrived next, then almanacs, then the famous mail-order catalogs whose pages ended up doing double duty. The joke wrote itself, reading material with tear-off coupons. In reality, people saved the soft pages for tough days and learned to crumple first to make them pliable. When a catalog finally went empty, a fresh one showed up in the spring, with more tempting pictures and eventually glossier paper that no one loved for this particular job. Progress has its downsides. Store-bought toilet paper crept westward in the late 19th century, first as a novelty in hotel privies and city homes, then as a quiet standard for anyone close to the rail lines and general stores on the far range. Old habits held longer. Why? By what nature and the farm already provided. A roll might appear in a bunkhouse as a gesture of modern pride, then disappear during the next storm when a wet roof turned luxuries into paper match. Etiquette never changed, even as materials did. Keep the privy far from the well, dig the pit deep and straight, throw a scoop of ash or dirt after each visit, and move the house when the earth said so. In camp, the same rules wore different clothes, distance from water, wind in your favor, cover your trace, and don't invite flies to supper. A clean camp spared you sickness, and a spared crew spared you grief. The corncob earned its legend not because it was charming, but because it was there, reliable as sunrise, free as neighborly advice, and tough enough to survive a January nobody. Wanted to discuss. Families passed buckets down the years the way they passed stories, with a shrug and a grin. When catalogs finally won the day, the cob went back to the barn, where it still did a dozen other jobs without complaint. If all this sounds peculiar, remember the West's first rule: use what you have. That rule built fences from driftwood, patched boots with harness leather, and kept a crew healthy with grass, sand, water, ash cobs, and a little common sense. Civilization didn't arrive in one big box. It came in daily decisions that slowly traded what works for what's easier. Both have their place. The trail favored the first, town favored the second. There's a quiet dignity in these unglamorous details. They say more about frontier life than any painting of a shootout. They tell you people were practical, adaptable, and too busy for embarrassment. The old hands would laugh at how much we talk about it now, but they'd be glad we learned the lesson they lived by. Keep it clean, keep it simple, and keep moving dots, so when someone asks, what did cowboys use instead of toilet paper? You can answer without flinching. Grass when the prairie was generous, sand when it wasn't, water when you could spare it, ash when you had a fire, and corncobs where the corn grew tall. It's not scandalous, it's frontier common sense, the kind that built a world out of wind, grit, and whatever didn't break in your hands.